Welcome back to another Architecture Rundown. I'm Chris Crocitto.
And I'm Ramses Terrero, and we're joined today with fellow university colleague and architectural associate, Austin Landrette.
What's going on, guys?
What's going on, man? Welcome.
Good to be here.
Thanks for taking the time out today, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah. So give us a quick summary of what type of company you're working for right now.
I'm working for a small local office. We're only like 11 people, including myself. So nice. Cool little small studio. It's a good environment.
Okay, and what type of companies does that company specialize in? Or what type of projects? I'm sorry.
I'd say the focus is like institutional stuff. So that's anything from K through 12, educational stuff, higher education, universities.
Nice.
A good bit of commercial stuff, but I'd say that's kind of like a side thing. So it's not the focus.
Yeah. Do you see that as like something you expected, like the studio environment as well as like the workload? Do you have like did you have any strange expectations? Did it meet what you originally thought about the field?
I don't know. I feel like most of us, we didn't know what to expect really, but I think yeah, no, it's in that I didn't know what to expect. So anything I got was really going to be a surprise, but I'd say the amount of responsibility you get with as little experience as you guys, us included, we all have. So yeah, that was kind of a surprise.
Talking about experiences and what you feel like you were not prepared with, what type of software do they typically implement in that company?
We use, I'd say, exclusively Revit. I mean, we use Lumion for our renderings, but for production, it's just Revit.
Is that something you feel like at least in that aspect, do you feel prepared to use Revit at the skill level they expect you to use it?
Maybe a little bit. I guess, if you have that kind of inherent skill level with any program, then you can kind of catch on quick. But yeah, no, not having too much experience with it, I think I caught pretty well. So it's not too bad once you start to get used to it. And then at this office, I can ask them questions all the time. So there's always somebody there to help you out.
No, that's great. Like a support system. I think that's like a big thing in the office setting specifically, because studio, in the school setting anyway, that it was pretty supportive. So, being able to find something like that in the professional setting is great, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies that are not willing to kind of like go through that mentorship aspect. Mm. Well, not a lot, but there's a few. So it's really good that at least the three of us have been able to like fit right into companies that are willing to kind of like guide us through everything.
Yeah. Right.
And guide us into how to like work at a pretty high level.
And I don't know if you guys were kind of strategic about that, but that was something I focused on when I was kind of in the job hunt. Like I was asking them, like, are you going to kind of teach me new things? Are you going to be there to help me if I need to learn? So,
yeah.
Yeah, man, definitely. I feel like we want to do everything, right? We want to do every single phase of the project. We want to take a project from beginning to end. And there are so many moving parts that take for a project to start from nothing and to actually getting built and realized. And it's a lot more than what we have any idea of, right? Like school does not teach you the whole process. No. And you can't really know the whole process until you experience it at firsthand.
Yeah.
So a company that can do that for you, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
And especially from the get-go, right? Recent grads, typically no experience. A lot of people might fear to show you these things because they might be scared that you might not be able to keep up.
Right.
But finding companies that are willing to take that risk, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
It's a big factor. A lot of companies that might pay you more, and they might have like a higher like pay grade, like big corporations. But I feel like the good thing with small companies like the ones that we work for is that they walk you through the whole process and you quickly learn how to behave like someone that's at the top of the pyramid. Like Christopher said in one of the past videos.
Yeah. Yeah, I think finding a place, kind of like what you said, Austin, like finding a place that'll nurture that kind of like eagerness to learn and like ability to kind of like bounce from object or from project to project, from like task to task is super important. Like, you know, we kind of compared it to the school studio setting. Is there anything like key that you brought from school studio into your office studio that you could say it was like a big help?
I mean, I think maybe the obvious thing is the kind of work ethic you get out of school. So you're prepared to work late hours, or, I mean, what other people might consider long hours. But besides that, I think school really just kind of sets you up to be taught. So you have the basic understanding, the common sense about architecture, maybe some of the vocab. Like I know a couple other people that they don't really, maybe their vocab's lacking, so they don't know exactly what their boss is talking about when they ask them to do something. So
yeah, I never thought that was such a important thing, like you're saying, until I got into the field.
Yeah,
I was talking to project managers and consultants and things of that nature. So, you know, 100% I can agree with what you're saying.
What would you say your typical day at the office looks like? Like, what's kind of like the workflow that the office has in separating different projects through its employees, and for you specifically?
Well, we're all in an open, you know, there's no like cubicles or anything. There's no separate offices for the principals, but there's a few principals. They act as project managers, and there's a couple other associates of mine that they'll act as a project manager. And I think that we're kind of all open. We might jump from project to project, but in the slower bits of the project, we'll be working maybe in a 2 or 3 person team. And then closer to deadlines, we'll all kind of come together and kind of knock out the essentials.
Yeah. Do you ever find any like snags or like communication issues when you're linking, like going from one of the smaller cohorts to like the larger group? Or is it pretty similar?
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody has like a different style, especially, and I think it comes down to the project manager. So they might want to run their project a little bit differently. I think each office will have their standard operating procedure or whatever, but you know, they'll kind of deviate a little bit, and that'll be the trick to kind of adjust to that.
Yeah, that's something that I think it's key for us. I've always said that I feel like we have to be flexible. I started working professionally 2 years before graduating, and in the beginning I was kind of shocked because it was where I worked for. I was an intern and a drafter, and there was only 5 designers, myself included, and we worked on mostly like mid-rise and high-rise buildings. And I was working on my first project, right? And then 2 weeks later, they're like, hey, you need to stop working on this, and you got to work on this other project. And the same week, the same thing happened. Hey, you got to stop this one. You got to work on this one. And a lot of people might feel like kind of like at a loss, right? Because it's very overwhelming. But I feel like it's part of the process, especially for us that work in small companies. We need to be able to stop a project halfway or any percentage of the way. Keep everything in mind, and then kind of move on. Like on this specific day or this specific week, you need to like focus on something else, go back to it, and it really trains your mind, and it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, I think something that comes out of that too is, at least in my office, we'll be switching between scales of projects. So one project I'm working on is a new academic building at a university, and that's got a lot of details, a lot of coordination with consultants, and then there's small little continuing service type projects, like putting in a cooler at an elementary school or something. And so kind of being able to jump between different scales of project is something that's kind of become an adjustment.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was always like a thing that I kind of like got hung up in school, like being able to jump from task to task. So I had to kind of like train myself to not get so anxious and caught up. And it kind of goes back to something you were saying, like, you know, you in school, you have to have a specific work ethic, and, you know, practice makes perfect, I guess, or not really. So that general idea or concept of the iterative nature of architecture, I think bringing that into your work ethic is something key. But is like what's something from school that you would tell people to focus on? Like, what was the one lesson that you wish you would have learned earlier?
I think like somewhere maybe midway through the program, I started to really understand what it was about architecture that I was interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're all interested in design and seeing a project come together, but kind of what is maybe your end goal with it all? What are you trying to chase with it?
Mm-hmm.
Focusing on that a little bit. And I think in our program, we had the thesis. So using that as a chance to explore it was what I really wanted to take advantage of.
Yeah, for sure.
And what's that, man? What's your end goal in this whole profession? I'm curious to hear it.
Right now, I'm kind of taking it step by step, but I see that there's kind of essential things that everybody needs. You know, you need a place to live, you need a place for school, healthcare, things like that. So I want to focus on those things and try to just kind of help build up, you know, everybody's environment.
Yeah.
Like I think architecture itself is this kind of altruistic thing. You know, we're designing for other people. It's not like we're only designing our own houses or whatever. So
yeah.
Kind of element about it that just comes with it.
That's great to hear, man. I feel the same way. I feel like I guess the style of architecture that I want to focus on is mostly on very large scale public spaces, and how we can kind of like redefine some typologies that have very they have a lot of constraints, such as like terminals, like airports and stuff like that, and how to implement like some more like public spaces and create like a more like unified world. So that would be, I guess, like my angle.
Yeah, no, we got a big responsibility as designers and architects, so I think it's something we all kind of want to chase after.
Yeah, yeah. I like the idea that you kind of got there. You're taking it step by step to create like a community or a communal fabric, but like one piece at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my like connection to that, or the way I could definitely relate to that, is through an idea I've always had about like communal spaces and like public spaces. Probably on like a smaller scale than kind of what Ramses is saying. His is on like the commuter scale, and then mine is kind of like on the community based, like almost like Savannah Squares. Mm-hmm. Like little community centers. That was always like something that really caught my attention the first time we went to Savannah, because my thesis was based in Savannah. So going back the second time was super eye-opening.
Right.
But, you know, creating public space for community outreach, like libraries, community centers and things like that, workforce housing, things like that have always really like caught my attention. And people think of them as like really banal and like somewhat boring spaces, but I think with material experiments and just playing with lighting and what typologies are, like I think it's our job to redefine what spaces can be, and I think that's always been like a goal of mine, to try and challenge.
Yeah, we should provide, you know, high quality spatial conditions for everyone, regardless of budget or like social and economic classes, right? I feel like that's an architect's duty.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter what scale of project you're tackling.
Yeah. How did you, I mean, we'll definitely want to get more in depth to your thesis specifically in like a later video, but I think I kind of want to hear a little bit about like, you know, how did you come about your premise for it, or like what kind of like nurtured that like spark?
I think the first thing would be to actually give a little credit to my professor. He really gave us a lot of freedom with what we were able to explore. We didn't have a specific project to do or whatever. Like there wasn't you have to do a library or something like that, which is a great project, something that's cool or whatever. But being able to kind of just explore it on my own was, I think, what led me there. Kind of letting a combination of maybe imagination and like general interest kind of combined together. I think that's where it really took me.
That's cool, man. What's one thing? What's one thing that you recommend everyone studying architecture right now to kind of like harp on and really focus on that you wish you would have done?
I think just focus on what it is you wanna learn. So say if you're focused on education, which I kind of was on my way out of school, look for an office that's gonna kind of focus on that. Look for an office that's focused on education, or if you're doing healthcare, focus on that. So
yeah, I think we spoke about this with Jose in one of the last videos, right? That when you're tailoring your portfolio, really make sure that you do your portfolio depending on what you want to do, right? In school, we kind of go over different typologies, different styles of architecture, and for the most part, we go through them because we kind of have to go through them, right? So we can kind of like learn about everything there is, but focus on exactly what you want to be doing the rest of your life. Me personally, we all had to take a year for experimental design, right? D7, Design 7 and Design 8.
yeah.
Which is not something that I'm like super into. And it's not anything that I am currently interested in working on for an office. So even if my projects, I'm very satisfied with them and I really like the outcome, I personally did not show either one of them in my portfolio because it's something that I really don't want to focus on.
Yeah, I heard a lot when we were setting up our portfolios, like, just put your best stuff in there. That's all that really matters. And it's like, well, you don't want to just put your best stuff. You want to put stuff you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And if you can make that your best stuff, obviously, then go for it. But
yeah, but it's exactly what you said, man. You got to find your passion, and you need to find a spot in an office that has the same passion you have and that is willing to give you the opportunity that the offices that we work for have given us, right? Complete freedom to learn, which I think is such an important thing that a lot of people like us, recent grads, overlook.
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes if that comes out of whether it's because I'm at a small office. So, like at bigger offices, you hear sometimes that it's a little bit harder to get that. So,
yeah,
I feel like that whole like ladder of importance and value is much harder to climb as opposed to at a smaller office. Like Christopher said, you can quickly show your value.
Yeah.
And they have to rely on you a lot more because obviously it's a lot harder to have a small amount of employees, and a lot of small offices, they still do big office work.
Right. And I think I can kind of maybe give an example of that. So like at my office, they were doing renderings and I thought they were really good, but obviously coming out of school, that was what we focused on a lot. So I was able to bring some of those skills to the table for them, but maybe at a larger firm where I was just doing drafting, focusing on details, I would have the opportunity to really bring that forward.
Yeah. It's great that you brought value to the table. It's something I've always harped on because I think it's super important. I mean, I don't know how you felt you did in school, but me personally, I always felt like a middle of the pack kind of guy. And even if your talents excel over that, I think it's important to know where your values lie, as in like a corporate structure, and what are you going to bring to that firm that makes you not expendable? Because as graduates, we're very, 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 very expendable. There's 100 people for every one person ready to take a spot. Mm-hmm. So, the fact that you brought that up is something very important. I'm like happy to see that most of our colleagues and friends are feeling the exact same way and revolutionizing something in their office, so I commend you for that.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, but I think it's good. You guys are putting that out there. I think this is a good way to kind of showcase that. So.
Yeah, man. Thank you. This is the goal that we have, right? We kind of want to be able to showcase how our education has led us in different paths, but how we all have kind of like the same mentality and how we bring our values to different offices and kind of showcase how different offices can operate, even if they're at the same scale, like what different programs each office uses or what different styles of architecture they tackle.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty cool for, for anyone to see. Like, this is something that I wish, right? Like, I was speaking with Chris before we started this, and I was really wondering what the process that you guys go through in your offices, like how it varies from what we go through.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, the way this was first was super organic. Like the whole idea of just taking it to video form, I think has already made an impact just in our own thinking. So like being able to see everybody else and connect is almost like being in studio again. And that was like one of my favorite things is like the camaraderie and like just deep conversation. I've always been a fan of just talking to people.
Right.
Yeah. Studio is the best time, I think, throughout my education, man. And I miss it, right? It's something I miss. Like, as much as I love working with Chris, he's the only one I see, right? Which is a great thing, right? But I miss this whole like communal setting, as he said. And
I can't imagine what you guys are going through not being able to be together, man. It must be tough.
Yeah.
I mean, every day we're doing this. So.
Yeah. Dude, we just got a new desk at work, a big 8-foot-long IKEA desk we put together.
Ooh, okay.
We had our own workspace. It was like Step Brothers, but like at work. So that was like our bunk bed.
We literally just almost finished renovating the whole office. We made this, like he said, this huge table for both of us, and it's like a share like work table.
Workstation.
Right.
And then this happens. So.
Yeah, no, I go back to the office every once in a while, and I'm kind of like lost in there. I'm like, man, nobody's in here. It just feels weird, empty office. Makes me want to go back, but
yeah, we see that, man. We follow your Instagram stories. You work a lot of overtime, which I think is great, and how you put it, right? It's people call it long hours,
right?
But to you is another day in the office, right? 'Cause I would imagine you're as passionate about your job and this profession as we are.
Definitely. I think you have to kind of take ownership, even though you may not be project manager, but you want to make that project manager look best. You want to look best. And obviously for your office, you want the project to come out the best it can. So it's kind of worth putting in those hours, I think.
Yeah, man. At the end of the day, even if that final, let's say, outcome, they take credit for it, right? Because we're not licensed architects, we're not signing or anything. You're growing as a person, and you're clearly showing the office your value, and people know, right? People know. Chris and I, we serve as project managers for a lot of the projects we work on, because it's only two of us that are the main designers in our office. So we kind of got thrown into that that jungle per se, and even though a lot of our sub-consultants and our clients are, let's say, they have much more experience within the projects that we do than we do, they know that we're producing high quality work for the fact that we're recent grads and that we're keeping up with like the rest.
I think that's something I wanted to touch on a little bit, because like even though we're, I guess you could say, unexperienced and experienced, but we still have that responsibility. So you could have us fresh out of school telling someone that's been in the field for 30 years, hey, you messed this up, you got to fix this for us right away, kind of thing. And a little daunting at first, but you adjust to it, you kind of get used to it.
Yeah. That's something we spoke about in the past video with Kevon, that we kind of have to fake it till we make it. We deal with a lot of people that have been on the field for decades, and we need to be able to adapt ourselves to have a high level conversation and to learn quickly everything that kind of like entails to that specific project. So in our end is a lot of studying, a lot of like preparation on like giving a presentation, and that's something that not everyone can do.
Yeah, and that vocab, like you said earlier, man, that vocab, like even if you're not like you don't have that gift of gab or like are well with talking to people, if you sound like you know what you're talking about, most of the time people will believe you, bro. I've seen that work firsthand. I'm like, damn, I sounded like I knew what I was talking about right there.
Yeah. That's why I'm asking you to make it. Take it till you make it. You got to know how to sell yourself.
Absolutely.
I mean, even if you're unprepared, you cannot make your office look bad. You cannot make yourself look bad, especially when you're in the spotlight and in front of people that are expecting a lot from you, right? Because you said you do educational projects. I would imagine these are government projects.
I guess, yeah, local government projects.
Yeah, local government projects. We also work with all our projects for the most part, or 80% of our projects are with government entities. Yeah. And as you know, most government entities, people have been there for decades, man.
They're set in their ways, and
they're set in their ways. You know, they know exactly what they want, and we have to quickly rise up to those occasions.
Right. And I think one thing I noticed, I worked on, there's private schools and, you know, public schools, obviously. So the way those projects, the way they operate differently is two completely different things. Because obviously the private school, they have a lot more leeway in what they want to do. So, yeah.
That's another difference we speak about when it comes to kind of like government entities and private clients.
Yeah.
Even though private clients, for the most part, you have a lot more freedom. They're more like breathing down your neck, and the time frames are a lot shorter than when it comes to a lot of government entities that you have. They're a little more lax, right? And the time frames are a lot longer, but you kind of don't have that much freedom when it comes to your design, right? For the most part, they have this specific ideal of what a project should be, and for the most part, is what a project has been, or a typology has been through decades.
Right.
Something that I really hope that can change at one point, because as we speak about previously, affordable housing does not have to look like the typical affordable housing to be successful. Utilizing the same budget. Yeah, utilizing the same budget and space planning better, having a different color palette, thinking about high quality spatial spaces.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't change anything for the worse. Like, it makes it better, but you're still operating with the same budget. But a lot of government entities, I feel like, they're like a little scared of experimenting.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes on how we could affect that more, because I wonder if in the office, an architectural office is the best place to do that. So if, say, that's something you're passionate about, how does an architect kind of get involved politically to change these things? Because obviously there's a big influence there.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a big power struggle. In our office, we're a small office, right? So we're pretty close to our principal, and he always gives us the freedom to design. But obviously he's a much older guy, and he's, you know, a little bit set on his ways.
Right.
And I'm currently working on an affordable housing project, and I really wanted to change the color palette. Right. But he really believes that the color palette should be a specific color palette, which is beige and red frames and red accents, which is typically what every single affordable housing or houses or apartment buildings looked like 50, 60 years ago. Right. Like those tones that don't contrast that much. Like it's something as simple as that. Like, I feel like can make like all the difference. Right.
So yeah, but you're able to still have that input, and I think that's something important too. So at my office, say in the beginning, if we're doing the design, we'll have a little office-wide charrette where everybody can have their input and kind of discuss the project. And like, even if your ideas don't get incorporated, it's still good to kind of exercise that.
Yeah, man. I mean, at least they give you the opportunity, as you say. A lot of big companies, they don't give that opportunity to everyone involved. Right? A lot of companies operate in studios or by tiers. So if they operate in tiers, I mean, the bottom tier only has to do what, you know, the person in charge is telling them. And I mean, I get it. You do need some type of kind of like a strong presence leading the pack when it comes to dealing and managing a lot of people. But this is another benefit that we feel like a small office has over the rest of the competition, man.
Yeah. Right.
Having our input.
You know, we've clearly seen throughout like today's conversation that, you know, you're extremely passionate about architecture, and you have your, you know, I would say like laser focus on like how you want to see your career out, which I think is amazing, man. But is there any field like you would have gone to before your architectural knowledge, and then is there a field that you'd go into now that you have your architecture knowledge other than architecture?
It's definitely harder to answer the after, because I think, or the before, sorry. Like when I got the orientation, that's when I realized, oh, like architecture, this is something I could be into. So before I had no idea, but now I think I know it's obviously something creative. I think, I've had time to kind of explore a lot of things, maybe like with drawing. I like a lot with cinematography. I know you're kind of interested in that too. So
yeah, the three of us are.
Yeah.
Like I would love to direct a movie. That would be so cool.
Yeah, that's something I've been big on, cinematography, man. I really wish I could. I really wish I could go back to school and just learn, man. Like I like education. Like I really like, I guess, our school or our way of schooling. I don't really know how those other design schools operate, but if they operate anything like architecture school, man, I would go back and learn.
Yeah, no, but I think right now we're all trapped at home. I think it's a good time to kind of explore the things, because you don't always have to go to school. Obviously, there's tons to benefit from going to school for things, but I'm just exploring it on your own, being self-taught. You can learn a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything. I'm pretty sure I can speak for the three of us, at least software wise. I mean, I'm pretty sure we're all self-taught. That's not really something they teach you in school.
Yeah, no, they might try, but it doesn't.
I don't think they've been that successful with it. Which I think is a little bit of a shame, man. I'm currently teaching software or computational design, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good. I think it's a really good class. Not because I'm teaching it, obviously, but like I'm teaching them like all the programs and tools that I wish I would have had throughout my school experience, because I feel like that would have really been beneficial to me, especially when I was younger. Unlike the two of you, I didn't have that much initiative at all until my final years of school. So, a lot of people, they lack that initiative, but if they had those tools, I feel like they could.
Right. And I think it's just that. So if you look at these programs as just tools, which I think that's really all they are for our design, but they used to spend, semesters teaching students how to draw, and that was their tool on how to design. So I wonder why we've kind of stepped away from that, because this is just a new tool. I think everybody needs to learn how to use it just to be more efficient in how they get their designs out there.
Yeah.
I think it goes like that. That's a great question, but I think the way we answer that is a couple ways. The reason that I've seen that it kind of like becomes less about that is because they're on computers. So a lot of that generation that was practicing drawing for semesters and years on end, because they realize that it's on the computer, they're like, okay, the students can teach themselves that. Let's teach them even more, which I think is kind of like the beauty of the time where we were in school, because I still consider ourselves learning all the time.
Right.
We can learn more aspects of it in a shorter amount of time and layer a little bit of a lot of stuff and just learn how to perfect it later on in life through the professional field.
I agree with you, but yes, but no. I mean, we still took a lot of classes on things that we don't use, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I think there's a way you gotta try to look at it. We may not use it, but if you gotta try to find ways to use it. So, like,
I'm sure.
Look at it.
I'm very, very sure that if all of us would have had the opportunity to take some type of Revit class, something as simple as that, I'm sure like everybody would jump the gun. Yeah. Right? As we all have seen and experienced, like that is the future. Right? Maybe not like the far future, but it's going to be the program that's going to be the most prominent right now.
Yeah.
In medium to large offices, or any project that's medium or at a bigger scale.
I wish Revit didn't get such a bad rap in school. Everybody kind of
exactly. That's
because it's a great tool. You can use it. It's really not as restrictive as I thought, but
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say that I wish they would teach us, because I mean I agree completely with you. Right? They should teach us how to design, how to think. right? I think that's what school should do.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a lot of educational institutions that teach you, which I think is good, the old ways of practicing architecture. But as great as it is to know, and I think it's amazing to know those things, I'm not, like shitting on it.
Mm-hmm.
They should also prepare you in the new ways of practicing architecture, which they don't.
Yeah. I think,
and like, at least we had the initiative, but like not a lot of people have that. And I know that falls like on the student themselves.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like it's also like our responsibility and the program's responsibility to prepare them as best as possible. And the only way to do that is to kind of like have this reformation and education that it's kind of parallel to how architecture is now.
Mm-hmm.
Which a lot of institutions, they're being parallel with how architecture was practiced 20 years ago.
Yeah. But I think content like this and like the other tutorials that you put out on your channel, I think that's kind of like pushing it. That's where you're going, like in teaching students how to operate now. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like,
I think that's starting to kind of become a strong influence, though, kind of like this open source teaching people.
Yeah.
The place, like I can learn something. I follow this guy from the UK. He does a lot of Revit tutorials. He teaches stuff in Dynamo and over it. So it's.
Yeah, I feel like you said, like this whole chaos that's happening in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Any creative person can see the best that can come out of this. Right. I think we should all be using this time to learn, to be as creative as possible, and to prepare ourselves as best as possible for when everything clears out and we have to go back out there. And this whole virtual, let's say like this virtual schooling, I think has been very successful for me specifically when it comes to teaching my students. Arguably a little more successful than before, since everything is it's obviously a computational class.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the physical constraints that I had before this whole virtual learning happened, that I had to go teach for a certain amount of time, and then I will work full time as an architectural designer in the office. Now I can subdivide my time to spend even more time teaching, and I do a lot of workshop with my students. We have workshops every week with programs or presentations, like teaching them how to effectively present their projects through sections, axonometrics, plans, and stuff like that. And like, at least for that aspect, I think this whole virtual thing has been great.
Yeah, look at Austin. Austin's been making art.
Yeah.
Looks dope.
I'm trying to get back in touch with my creative side.
Yeah, it looks great. Yeah, I think that's 100% what this is for, as like Ramses said, like creatives have to take heed, and you kind of have to realize that if you're not creating right now, then, you got to fix your strategy of like what you're doing and why you started creating in the first place,
This is the perfect time to do this, man. I mean, we're all still working from home. We're still putting those hours to working, but the hours that you would typically spend commuting, right? Those are extra hours in the day that you have.
2 hours sometimes.
Man, I can't. You'll have to speak for yourselves there. I take like 5 minutes to get home and back from work. It's crazy.
I mean, I take 10 minutes. I'm speaking for Christopher. He takes.
Yeah. I have an hour each way usually. Like 45 to get to work, like an hour and a half, sometimes at the most to get home. Not usually.
At the most, an hour and a half. Not too long.
Yeah, it's not super long or anything, but I make it work. But yeah, this has been like being able to record videos and podcasts and just like learning something new. I downloaded programs so I could learn how to make beats, something like that I wanted to do since I was in high school. So like, I don't know, like little things like that, being able to like kind of control your time better is something that's sprouted out of this, I guess you would say.
Yeah. And thanks to that, we've been able to kind of create this platform.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I feel like as horrible as everything that's happening is, this has been a good opportunity to catch up with, friends and colleagues from school and kind of showcase everyone.
Yeah, we got a talented group of people that we're really happy to reconnect with. So thank you, man, for coming on. We appreciate it.
And we got one final question for you. It's a very important question.
Oh man, here it comes.
Here it comes, the big question.
Yeah, aside from their personal dealings, as Kevon brought up in the last video, from an architectural perspective, are you Team Mies or Team Corbu?
Man, I've been thinking about this maybe all week.
Yeah.
I think I gotta say Team Mies.
All right,
there we go,
man. That's the right answer.
There you go.
Yeah, but I'll explain why maybe, and I think it's maybe just his presence in the Bauhaus. I'm always kind of gravitated to their kind of ideals they got over there. So if he had a part in influencing that, you know, he's got to have something going on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Bauhaus is definitely one of the most iconic buildings for artists and creatives, and I think it's something that any design education or any design field should know about, right? Kind of like, oh, go ahead, my bad.
No, it's the Bauhaus, and it's interesting because obviously they're like a pioneer school, but they've constantly been adapting, and the stuff they do there now is really really progressive stuff. So it's interesting that they keep up to date.
Yeah, our university and our educational program, they have a class that you can actually go to the Bauhaus and stay over there for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's 2.5 weeks.
2.5.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's amazing that I don't think every university can say. And programs like that is what I feel like make our institution so powerful and so global, and it maintains it like very culturally diverse.
Very worlds ahead,
as the president would say. Yeah, the school president, not the
not the other guy.
Not the other guy.
But yeah, man, I think like, you know, you shed a lot of light on some of the things that we've always, you know, wondered about other small offices. And, you know, we appreciate that and that you brought a different perspective on your experience and just the overall field. So thank you for that, man.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you guys had me on.
Yeah, man. It was great having you on.
All right. It's been another Architecture Rundown.